You look like you've done that Love Island thing. You've had your teeth whitened.
You see, I'm on a different laptop than usual.
Oh, I tell you what,
I've got one of these lads here as well, so that's kind of...
It is doing you plenty of favours.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You're looking well. Joe, whatever light Richie has, I'd invest in it.
Wow. That a filter, Richie?
I can't say, Joe, and I'd rather you not put me on the spot. My use of filters is my own business.
Okay.
If I feel it makes me present my best version of me, then it's fully within my purview to do just that.
No, it sure is. It sure is. Whatever makes you feel good.
Yeah, my filters make me feel good, Joe.
No amount of filters are going to help me, I can tell you.
That's true.
It's a terrible, terrible thing to say. So, could be another eventful night. I'm not sure it's quite going to come down to yellow cards tonight. It might. It might come down to yellow cards. Who knows how Japan, Spain, and Germany, Costa Rica is going to develop. I was quite shocked, and I don't clip this up because I don't want it getting out there. I was quite shocked that the BBC commentator didn't fully get what was going on with the yellow cards. There was this long silence where it was being explained to him, and then Danny Murphy says, "So how many yellow cards have Mexico got?" You don't expect me to know that. I was like, I do expect you to know that. That's rule number one, because it wasn't insane results that happened last night, that this was a 1 in 500 shot of it coming down to this. Like, it was quite possible it would come down to yellow cards. So it just added a little bit of extra confusion. It was a very, very strange night at the World Cup. And it was a very strange day as well, Joe. Romelu Lukaku. Oh, God, I feel a lot of sympathy for Romelu Lukaku. He's obviously had a huge amount of injuries all season. He's barely played any football. Comes on for Belgium. It's all set up in the second half for him to be the hero. And dear God, how many chances does one man need?
It was tough. On the not clipping your criticism of the BBC, I think it's good to see that you're still harbouring hopes of a job there. Don't ever lose that. Don't give up.
Yeah. Listen, I will research the all possible scenarios and permutations. It's the only guarantee I can give you.
I only found out today that a red card would have been worth 4 yellows in the system.
A second yellow. So if Krajkowiak had received a second yellow, that would have put them level on points. So they took him off pronto.
Today was amazing, Croatia, Belgium. Dries Mertens, I had the sound down, so maybe this was a talking point throughout the first half. Dries Mertens put in truly one of the worst individual performances I've ever seen. Of all time. It was, hands down, one of the worst. Lukaku, as you said, came off the bench half-time for Dries Mertens. He's played 31 minutes of football since August. Clearly he would be starting if he was fitter. They had to roll the dice. And as you said, chance after chance after chance. There was the initial one where he hit the post and it was difficult. He still should have scored, but his angle was tight and he had to curl it around someone to get it in. They were narrowing the gap he had, the window he had, but he still probably had enough room to score and should have scored. And you wonder then, could it be one of those days for Lukaku? And boy, did it snowball. And like, thankfully for him, I think what would have been the most haunting chance, the Kevin De Bruyne cross for the header where it was 3-4 yards out. Admittedly, it took a late-ish deflection, so he had to react to it. But he definitely had enough time, and a sharper Lukaku would have had enough time. And he managed to just head it over the bar, and the look of shock on his face. I mean, just horror and shock. Thankfully for him, that's not going to be the haunting moment it could have been, because the ball was just out of place or it wouldn't have counted. And then there were just a few others where...
after is far more haunting, because we were actually debating out in the office which was worse. I felt like you that the one that hit the post was a degree of difficulty to it, the way he was trying to bend the ball in, and he couldn't have done a huge amount more, whereas a lot of the lads outside felt that was far worse than the header, which, as you say, wouldn't have counted anyways. Surely the one that he's 2 yards out, he chests it down, and he can't get on the end of the ball, is the one that's going to haunt him.
That's a classic, he's not fit, and you're heavy-legged, and you're not sharp in your mind, and you're just not reacting well. I think if that happens when he's played 15 games this season, he just reacts adeptly, and it's the easiest goal of all time. But it's still haunting. I mean, it looks awful, and it is awful. I would definitely have the header as worse than the one off the upright, but like not much in between. Probably should have scored both. Certainly should have scored both. And I thought that, like, it was... I don't know if you got to see, because I know you're busy putting the show together as well. When he walked off at full time, Gary Lineker had mentioned that he had been consoled by Henry, and then in fairness, the BBC dug out the footage just to defend the BBC, just to defend their honour here a moment, Nathan.
They've taken it off
against your attacks. They managed to dig up the footage then of Lukaku walking straight for the touchline. Certainly did not want to be shaking hands with any Croatian players, just wanted to get off. And Henry, I suppose, fellow striker, not that you needed to be a striker to appreciate what Lukaku had just been through or what he's now facing, but Henry went straight to him and there was a long hug. And then there was footage of Lukaku punching the side of the dugout, and to the extent that the entire Perspex glass came out of the slot. And I'd say he's hurt his hand, actually. I wouldn't think he's too worried about it, but he properly closed fist punched it, just furious. So absolutely horrendous. Like, genuinely, it's horrendous because he's better than that, clearly.
Roberto Martinez stepped down straight after the game. No great surprise there. The inquest into this golden generation, did they deliver?
No.
It's going to be did they not? See, I wonder on this. They came third at the last World Cup.
I know, they should have at least won a European Championships. Germany have just gone 1-0 up, by the way. I think Serge Gnabry has just nodded them in front. So that's Germany on the road to getting into the next round. They still need a Spanish win. They have, you can't look at that team with the players that they have from front to back, with one of the best keepers in the world for the past decade, a couple of the best midfielders. They've had, it depends on form, obviously, with Lukaku and a couple others, but they've had some of the best strikers. They're so laden with talent that one trophy and getting beyond the semi-final should have been something that they've been aiming for and something that they've done on a couple of occasions, and they haven't. I think, without wanting to give the BBC another kicking, Jermaine Genius raises a really interesting point towards the end of the game this afternoon, where he's talking about De Bruyne, and he was saying that he doesn't see nearly enough of the ball when he's playing for Belgium, and he hasn't, watching him throughout this tournament, it's certainly a different role that he plays, where he's kind of conducting the orchestra for Manchester City and almost everything goes through him. Whereas they weren't using them to that degree with Belgium, and you kind of wonder why, because he's that good that he can kind of carve open anybody with a decent pass and with a decent bit of movement. But they've underperformed. With the talent that they've had.
Have they?
I don't think they've
aside from De Bruyne, who are the great central midfielders they have? Tielemans blows hot and cold. I look and Axel Witsel has about 125 caps. Axel Witsel's bang average.
Witzel's
Vertonghen and Alderweireld, because they've been playing in the Premier League and they were very good Premier League defenders. Are they among the all-time greats? They're all very good players, but to be beaten by the eventual winners in their last two major tournaments.
There's a difference between all-time greats and being very good. And being very good at international level is very often enough. And if you manage to get a very good set of individuals playing as a team, you can make hay. And we've seen umpteen cases of that down through the years of teams who've managed to run through tournaments with a couple of excellent players and a lot of very good ones. And Belgium, you would regard as one of those. The golden generation stuff is overhyped, but I don't think they've ever been in a position, even looking through 86 when they got to the semis, that was a team that finished third in their group and kind of ambled their way towards a semi-final where they were overhauled by Argentina. And beyond that, they haven't offered much in a tournament. Whereas this was definitely a chance over the course of the last decade, not here necessarily, but definitely over the last decade, to, with the players they had at their disposal, kind of break the hegemony of the likes of Italy and France and Germany in Europe and Spain, and provide a winning team in a major competition. And they've failed to do that. Their choice of manager hasn't helped. How Roberto Martinez got that job.
It's international football. What great managers are getting the big gigs?
But you don't need a great manager. You just need somebody who's got a better CV than Roberto Martinez.
But it's not on Roberto Martinez that Eden Hazard has just fallen off a cliff in the last.
Well, he's thrown away his own career. I would agree with that.
That's we're building the talents of this on all of these players at their absolute peak. When you actually look at this team right now, with the exception of De Bruyne, who's actually there, and you're right on De Bruyne. You do watch De Bruyne, Joe, and maybe that intense coaching style of Pep Guardiola and the way Manchester City play just suits him down to the ground, because particularly in that first game of this tournament, you saw him burst through the middle 4 or 5 times, and whereas you watch Manchester City and you almost know the movement of all the players in front of him, nothing was happening at all in front of him for Belgium. Spain, by the way, have gone 1-0 up against Japan, so Spain and Germany both leading.
Morata with the goal.
All the greats.
He did have one moment in the first half, De Bruyne, where he burst through the middle in typical fashion and played through Dries Merton, and well, you know the rest. I've made my feelings on Dries clear. I always thought they were overrated. I always felt their world ranking was an odd anomaly. Anytime Belgium are number 1, Belgium are number 2, admittedly, I wasn't watching a huge amount of them, but I looked at the team sheet routinely, and certainly now, whatever about maybe when they finished third in the World Cup. Obviously, if you finish third in the World Cup, you can certainly win it. But I don't think. I think we need to revisit any sense that this Belgium team never delivered. It was their destiny to win a World Cup. They were just that good. I think they were a good team, and for Belgium, they were absolutely a golden generation. And the rankings were very favourable to them. And you can read too much into rankings for sure. But looking at that team today, if you take De Bruyne out of it, it's incredibly ordinary.
I think we can cast aside this World Cup anyway, because it was probably 4 years too late for this group of players, and they very much played like it. And the age profile, whether it's Mertens or Vertonghen or Alderweireld, like they're all above 30 now at this stage, and so far beyond it in a couple of cases. You can and Hazard's last 2-3 years, like his Real Madrid career has been a disaster. But if you go back 4 or 5 years, you look at the team that we would have played in the Euros in 2016. Certainly, that is a team that should have been targeting major championships.
But does that overly influence our thoughts, that 3-0? Like, I still look at Thomas Meunier and go,
no.
oh, one of the great, right? Thomas Meunier, what a player. And then actually every time I've seen him over the last 6 years, I'm like, oh, it turned out that Ireland team maybe was quite easy to play against for Thomas Meunier that day, and he could look like the most marauding right back we've seen in world football, where actually he's grand.
Yeah, he's grand. I think semi-final stages, it was about their level.
But they were beaten by France, the eventual winners, 1-0, edged out. Italy, the eventual winners at Euro 2020, edged out 2-1. That didn't perform exceptionally well in those games.
No, they didn't. They were deservedly beaten in those games.
But I do wonder, even here in Ireland, if we are looking at that 3-0, just how brilliant they were that day. It was, as much as it could be a pleasure to watch Ireland get hammered, 3-0 it could have been 5 or 6, unless of course we hadn't been robbed of that potential penalty earlier in the game.
Yeah. I take Richie's point as well. They're not total hype, but I don't know, in 10, 15 years, I think they won't be long remembered, really. Like for Belgium, I'd say there's a lot of navel gazing, but they're obviously biased. I don't know. Did you not always think in the rankings that their position was odd?
I'd never read into, we were a top 10 team at one stage, regardless of how good we were results-wise under Jack Charlton, but we were never being one of the top 10, 15 teams in the world.
Did they pull a Wales on it at one stage where they weren't having as many friendlies so that their ranking would be somewhat elevated? I feel like when I was talking to Joey and Doe last week and asking him about who was really running this Cameroon team, was it Rigobert Song, was it really Samuel Eto'o pulling the strings? And he looked at me and laughed and goes, why do you care so much about what's happening in Cameroon? I feel like saying that. Why do we actually, now that we've spoken for about Belgium for 50 minutes, I'm like, why do we care so much about this Belgian side?
Yeah, agree.
Screw them.
Croatia weren't very good today, by the way.
Coming to a Goodison Park near you. Croatia weren't great.
Croatia weren't very good either, by the way. There was a moment where I think Michael Richards went into default mode because there was just Modric walking around the pitch, and he just you feel compelled to say it. So he was saying, and he's a pleasure to watch. Modric just controlled the pace of the game today. Yeah. We had just watched Belgium knock on the Croatian goal for about 45 minutes straight.
They started very bright. They started very bright and then slunk back into themselves.
Oh,
horrifically.
They really did.
Their centre halves were good, but beyond that, they offered nothing going forward. And I don't know. You see what's coming out of this group tonight. You see Germany maybe hitting their straps. Spain are obviously in the form that they're in. I don't think Croatia will be going beyond the second round.
Maybe not. They are such a pleasure to watch, though. They're such beautiful footballers. I do love watching them. They are a pleasure to watch, and they get out of such tight situations with no pace, no physicality, just technique, and it is great to watch. I thought the other, as a last point in that game, the other really strange thing was, given the stakes and given the tension and given the fact it was quite a good game, the atmosphere was on mute, bar the big chances. You would be like, oh, there are people there, but genuinely it was like a friendly, and it was I don't know, is it because there's,
I think it's 2 European teams, and that the European supporters generally haven't travelled. The games that have had the atmosphere are involving the South American teams, or the African or Asian teams, where the South American supporters, despite the fact they have to travel twice as far as the Europeans, just go in such insane numbers all of the time anyways. But it does feel for a lot of the European teams it's very flat. Even watching the England game the last night, there was nothing.
Nothing. Well, I mean, this game, again, so much riding on it. I mean, possession being turned over, or tackles won, or refereeing decisions, blown for a foul, like just nothing from the crowd. Unless there was a sniff of a goal, the crowd were fairly uninterested in any toing and froing. It was slightly surreal, actually.
It's almost like Qatar isn't a suitable venue for a World Cup.
Wow.
The Newsround is brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Probably your last day to do it because it's now the 1st of December. So let's get into the news round. There are goals in both the 7 o'clock kickoffs, Richie.
Yeah, Germany know only a win will do if they're to avoid back-to-back group stage exits at the World Cup. They are 1-0 up against Costa Rica thanks to that Serge Gnabry header. Leroy Sané replaced Tito Kehrer for the Mannschaft with Joshua Kimmich slotting in at right back. Germany not only need 3 points tonight, they also need Spain to beat Japan. That game is also underway and also going in the favour of both Spain and Germany. Alvaro Morata, as we mentioned, with the goal for them. Morocco qualified as Group F winners earlier this evening. First half goals from Hakim Ziyech and Youssef El Nesri saw them beat Canada by 2-1. Croatia are through as runners-up following that goalless draw with Belgium, and the result means Belgium go out at the group stage for the first time since 1998, and Roberto Martinez confirmed afterwards it was his final match in charge.
Yes, yeah, that was my last game with the national team, and it's emotional, as you can imagine. It's been amazing. It's been 6 years that we've been able to do everything that you want to do in a club. We did it in a national team. It makes me extremely proud, and we loved the way that this team has played and is giving everyone an incredible joy. And the real fans in Belgium, they appreciated what this generation are doing, and it's the time for me to accept that this is the last game.
So as it stands, Richie, it will be Spain against Croatia and Germany against Morocco.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be in Morocco next week, so I'm delighted that they got through as group winners because it means it's going to be at least one night of crack over there next week. But yeah, it's a remarkable turnaround by them. They've got some really good players, and Achraf Hakimi has got to be regarded as one of the best right fulls in the world, and he's playing to that level. So far, Hakim Ziyech is playing above himself. They've got players throughout that team that have played above and beyond, and it's brilliant. Like, it's the first time since '86 that they've gotten past the group stage, Morocco. So yeah, absolutely delighted for them. And one of those teams, as we mentioned, that have actually brought atmosphere through their fans to the World Cup. Them and Tunisia, the North African sides, have been brilliant in that regard. So long may they continue on in the tournament, because I think they've been a bonus for it.
Yeah, and top the group, didn't just get through.
Yeah.
So we've plenty more football coming. John Giles on the way, giving his thoughts on the World Cup from 7:30, and then Damien Delaney is going to join us on the football show from 9 o'clock. In between, we're going to be talking to Dr. Laura Finnegan, who's a researcher and lecturer in talent development, and Marcus Sullivan, who's the head of football at the Norwegian School of Sport. We're going to be talking about relative age effect, about maturation rates, about biobanding, which is something we've spoken about before. But Mike Quirk has a podcast on the OTB GAA feed, a coaching podcast, and he had a really interesting episode. It was in the last week with Fionn Fitzgerald, who was the Kerry captain back in 2014, but he's doing a lot of research into all this and looking at the Kerry Academy, and the results, as we know, are just so stark for players who are not born in the first 3 or 4 months of the year, or players with later maturation ages, so players who grow, who develop that little bit later, have very little chance of making the breakthrough. And you do wonder how many players are falling out of the system that could make it at a later age if we change the way we looked at it. So that is coming up between 8 and 9 as well. Slowly but surely, the fixtures are coming in for the Republic of Ireland's European Championship qualifiers.
Certainly are, and confirmed today that the Republic of Ireland's qualifier away to the Netherlands will be played at the Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam. Ireland haven't lost there on their previous 2 visits, the first of which, of course, was a famous 2-2 draw. The game takes place on Saturday, November 18th of next year, and that, of course, is Ireland's final game in their group.
The one thing you can take, Joe, from listening to all the various experts around relative age effect is that there's no easy or straightforward answer around this, of being able to get people of similar ability together at the same time, where they all develop at the same rate. It's practically impossible, but we're probably doing nowhere near enough.
Yeah. Are we even at the point of splitting the year into 2?
Well, that was something that Dr. Laura Finnegan was suggesting. Again, it would take a huge administrative effort as to, could you do a rolling 9-month season so that it's January 1st and then it changes the next season to become September 1st, so that the younger players then become the older players. It does feel, I think most leagues have done that. I think certainly when I started playing, it was the 1st of September and then it became the 1st of January, as it is in most places right now. They're obviously going so much deeper into it now with maturation rates and looking at your height and assessing the height of your parents and being able to work out just how far along you are. And like some of what Fionn Fitzgerald was talking about, 13-year-olds, some of whom physically would be of that of an 18-year-old playing alongside players who'd be physically that of an 11-year-old. And obviously everybody's looking at the one who physically is like an 18-year-old, and he's the one who makes the breakthrough, and the 11-year-old ultimately probably just drops out of the system.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, he was saying it publicly anyway. I was talking to Paddy Andrews just last week, not a big man. And he was saying that, he was like, see the size I am now? That's what size I was at 14, 15. So I had zero subtlety, but I was able to bash my way through, and he had to develop the subtlety in his game as time went on, So I don't know. I would think certainly splitting the year into two is an obvious starting point, and so many kids and so many more kids are playing sport than ever before, and like GA, so many volunteers, so many people willing to get involved. I think in large swathes of the country you could do that, and then maybe in the less populated areas, I guess in the less populated areas you have a better chance of playing and getting minutes if you're younger. So I mean that should be relatively doable. I would just think awareness,
one
you
of
just
the
can't
things
talk
that
about it enough, so the coaches couldn't be more aware of it, and just be absolutely militant about giving the smaller kids minutes on the pitch. And if they can just hang in there, obviously they'll develop. Because the other problem, as you know, and I'm sure it comes up in the conversation, is the gap between them is purely down to size initially, and then it's down to, minutes on field, so they develop better, so they actually do become better, more technical than the smaller players, so it's a double whammy. And then they're exposed to better quality coaches because they're on the representative teams of the better teams, so it's an absolute chasm by the time 14, 15, 16 comes around.
All of the time. Fionn Fitzgerald did an experiment during a Kerry Academy game where they put the early maturers against each other, so the bigger players together and the smaller, more technical players who were, as you would say, maybe stuck playing corner forward. And the results now, I think he hadn't got to the level where it was fully scientific as of yet, where obviously the smaller players enjoyed it much more because they were some of them were playing middle and midfield, they were having to take on different aspects. But the bigger players struggled because they couldn't dominate the way they had. They felt they'd far less time, less space on the ball. And that's the other problem with this, that actually when you get to that final stage, senior level, that so many of those players have had it so easy for so long and been so dominant for so long that when they come up against everybody's that good, they don't know how to handle it.
They've lost their main advantage. That's kind of the Paddy Andrews example I was giving you. And then we've talked in the show just this summer, obviously, about Erling Haaland, who was small and was playing against players a year or two older than him because he was just that good. And he relied solely on movement and intelligence. And then he just had the growth spurt. So, I mean, for him, it was perfection. And, of course, look, which brother is always the best, Nathan? Or sister, I guess, increasingly, as more and more girls play sport now. It's always the youngest because they're up against the bigger types and they're developing all the skills, and then suddenly they catch them. My two younger brothers are taller than me now, which is a thrill, obviously. And so that's why if you can just get those smaller players to hang in there, they've developed so many more skills.
My 10-year-old may well be on his way home from football training in the car. All my children are equally talented at everything they do.
But if you had to pick one...
Belgium, great in paper. Unfortunately for them, football is played on grass, with reference to Brian Clough. And 20 minutes into a Joe Nathan Newsround, not a lick of golf. My equilibrium has been affected. Please address. Before we go, we'll get to a couple more stories quickly. We should mention... So Golf Weekly, as you know, if you want to get involved every single Thursday, otbsports.com/Golf Weekly. You subscribe to our Patreon. But last week, Padraig Harrington was on, and it was so good. Joe, you felt everyone should just get a little bit of this.
It's free. Just search OTB Daily, and you can have the Padraig Harrington episode for free.
If you want to revolute me money for that interview separately, I will accept. If you feel you should donate, just even as a one-off, I'm more than happy to take that cash. It's fine. What else you got for us, Richie?
And that's why I'll never get the BBC gig. Simon Zebo returns to the Munster wing for tomorrow's United Rugby Championship game away to Edinburgh. That sees Shane Daly switch to fullback. There are 4 alterations to the Munster pack, with Jeremy Loughman, Niall Scannell and John Ryan forming an all-new front row. It's a 200th cap as well for Ryan tomorrow night. Gavin Coombs starts at number 8. For their part, Edinburgh welcome back a host of internationals, including Pierre Schumann, Viliama Mata, Blair Kinghorn, Duhan van der Merwe and Darcy Graham. A moment's applause will be held before all of this weekend's URC matches in honour of the late Doddy Weir. And Edinburgh have encouraged fans attending the Dam Health Stadium tomorrow to dress in tartan to celebrate the life of the former Scotland.
And there is golf for most of the top players. This is their final action of the year. Shane Lowry amongst them.
Yeah, 6 to go of his opening round at the Hero World Challenge. He is currently 2 over par. The lead there in the Bahamas, jointly held at the moment by Korea's Tom Kim and Tommy Fleetwood, both of whom are 2 under par. And a really good day today for County Down's Tom McKibben, just 3 shots off the lead after the opening day of the South African Open. The County Down golfer shot a 5 under round of 67, aided by a hole-in-one at the 11th. Gary Hurley is 3 under. He shot a 69 today, while John Murphy finished the day on 2 over par. Tristan Lawrence is the clubhouse leader on 8 under. And as I say, McKibben's round helped by that hole-in-one at 11.
All right, I see a picture of Tom McKibben, but all vision, no sound from Tom. But he did have that hole-in-one.
Speechless after the hole-in-one.
Absolutely.
Speechless.
I most definitely would not be. Have you had a hole-in-one, Joe?
Never. You?
Never. I'm still just happy to hit the green. God, I would. The amount of videos and photographs I would take if I ever managed it.
You would be insufferable.
Even more insufferable. We got to leave it there. Joe, enjoy your weekend.
Okay, guys, see ya.
Richie, thanks as always.
I'll have to whiten my teeth further.
Looking beautiful as ever. The scores at the World Cup then, no drama so far. Germany 1-0 up against Costa Rica. Spain 1-0 up against Japan. So as it stands, both those sides would qualify for the knockout stage. Time for the cash machine.
All you need for Christmas.
News Talk's Christmas Cash Machine.
Grace Hanlon in Kildare became the latest winner when she answered our call this afternoon. We're going again now, and it's the Christmas cash machine. We've yet another huge cash amount on the line. Here's the number you need to know. €51,172.03. Text play to 57557. That's 57557. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Then across the Go Loud network of stations, Barry Dunn will make that call. If your phone rings, answer it within 5 rings. Tell him the exact amount in euro and you'll win the cash. Remember, it's €51,172.03. Over 18s only. Text cost $2.50. Terms and conditions on newstalk.com. John Giles up next.